Japan's disaster relief teams fly into shattered cities worldwide. Yet when a 9.0 magnitude earthquake tore through its own coastline, the government told foreign rescuers to stay away. This isn't hypocrisy, it's a constitutional legacy that turns self-reliance into sovereignty. Few nations are as generous as Japan when the ground shakes somewhere else. The Japan International Cooperation Agency formed its disaster relief team in 1987. Since then, its specialists have deployed from the 2005 Pakistan earthquake to countless other crises. When a 2010 earthquake flattened parts of Haiti, Japanese teams were among the first to arrive, pulling survivors from collapsed schools. JICA's dogs and doctors became a global staple of rapid response. That generosity is backed by enormous sums. In 2022, Japan's official development assistance reached $17.5 billion. And back in 1989 its ODA was the highest in the world, outstripping even the United States. From the rubble of Haiti to the floodplains of Mozambique, Japanese aid became a symbol of compassion as long as it was delivered elsewhere. But when an earthquake flattened Kobe in 1995, the same nation hesitated. The New York Times reported that Japan was reluctant to accept help from abroad for quake victims. That reluctance traced back to a pattern forged in war. During the 1990 to 1991 Gulf War, Japan provided $9 billion in monetary support but could not dispatch troops due to Article 9 constraints. The template was set: Japan would open its checkbook, not its borders. Financial contributions, yes. Foreign boots on Japanese soil, a different matter entirely. The same Article 9 that blocked troop deployments in the Gulf War also defined Japan's self-defense posture. For decades, the JSDF could only operate at home, its hands tied by a peace constitution. That began to change in 2007 when Section 2 of Article 3 of the Self-Defense Forces Act was revised, moving overseas disaster relief from miscellaneous regulations to basic duties. The amendment was subtle on paper, but its effects were seismic. Almost overnight, the force that couldn't fight abroad transformed into the world's most prepared domestic disaster army. It drilled constantly for the big one, a future Nankai Trough quake, a Tokyo inland trembler. The JSDF built a dense network of bases, pre-positioned equipment, and a mobilization capacity unparalleled in the democratic world. That transformation wasn't just a legal formality, it reshaped national psychology, convincing the public that the JSDF could protect the homeland from any natural calamity. The constitution that restricted projection of power overseas paradoxically forged a machine that projected self-sufficiency inward, reinforcing the idea that Japan could and should stand alone. Kobe was the moment when the gap between giving and receiving gaped open. On January 17, 1995, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake killed thousands and destroyed over 100,000 buildings. International rescue teams mobilized within hours, Swiss crews with dogs, French urban search and rescue specialists, British engineers. Japan accepted, but slowly, reluctantly, and with heavy restrictions. Swiss dogs were held in quarantine, French teams waited days for official clearance. The delays were not malicious, they were the system's default setting. Japanese disaster law at the time didn't have a fast track for foreign search and rescue teams, so customs, quarantine, and chain of command held up every offer. The pattern was set: foreign aid, if accepted at all, would arrive late and under conditions so onerous they sapped the urgency. The New York Times headline that February captured the mood: Japan is reluctant to accept help from abroad for quake victims. That reluctance was not born of arrogance, it was an institutional spasm from a system designed around self-reliance. The country that flooded the world with aid dollars could not easily open its own door. On March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Tohoku, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan. Within minutes, tsunami waves climbed to 40.5 meters in Miyako, sweeping cars and homes up to 10 kilometers inland. The official death toll eventually reached 19,759, with over $300 billion in economic damage, making it the costliest natural disaster in history. Japan's response was immediate and staggering. The JSDF mobilized more than 100,000 personnel, its largest domestic operation since World War II. That immense deployment was a direct product of the 2007 reforms that had turned the force into a disaster specialist. Yet the same institutional reflexes that enabled that massive domestic response also dictated that foreign rescuers would wait. Search and rescue teams from the United States, Australia, and the UK offered help. Most were told to stand by. Some eventually entered, but bureaucratic hurdles, quarantine requirements for dogs, and a general sense that Japan could manage alone slowed the process. Even the United States, Japan's closest ally, offered the aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Yet while some U.S. forces eventually assisted with logistics, the initial relief phase remained overwhelmingly Japanese-run. The very law that allowed the JSDF to master disaster also convinced the system that outside assistance was unnecessary even when the scale demanded it. This institutional reflex didn't emerge from a nebulous national pride. It was engineered by the same legal reinterpretations that built Japan's disaster muscle. In 2015, the legislation for peace and security further loosened Article 9, allowing the JSDF to assist allies in collective self-defense, a historic shift from a purely self-defense force. Japan could now fight alongside partners overseas, but domestically, the doctrine of self-reliance remains sacrosanct. The paradox sharpened. The more Japan expanded its capacity to project force abroad for humanitarian ends, the more it sealed the homeland as a sovereign act. Foreign boots on Japanese soil became a constitutional anomaly, a breach in the narrative of a self-sufficient, peaceful nation whose borders could only be crossed by its own uniformed defenders. Even as JSDF medics treated victims in Nepal, the image of a French rescue dog sniffing through rubble in Tokyo felt like a sovereignty violation. By 2016, the JSDF had carried out dozens of international relief missions, from Nepal to the Philippines, but Japan had never hosted a comparable foreign deployment on its own soil, not even for a tabletop exercise. That path-dependent logic hardened into policy, embedded in cabinet office manuals, disaster drills, and budget allocations. A nation that had rewritten its constitution to reach out to the world had inadvertently built a wall around itself. Now, that logic may finally be cracking. The Cabinet Office has begun reshaping disaster preparedness through data-driven collaboration. In July 2026, the Diet established a new disaster management agency, the first dedicated national body with the mandate to overhaul response policy. The agency is tasked with integrating international coordination from the first hour of a catastrophe. For the first time, the institutional machinery that built Japanese self-reliance could be reprogrammed to accept help. The decades-old contradiction, giving billions abroad while cordoning off the home front, may dissolve. Officials are already drawing up protocols for rapid visa issuance for foreign rescuers and pre-negotiated deployment agreements. The new protocols mark the first admission that self-reliance can become self-defeating when a megaquake paralyzes a region. Japan might yet prove that true sovereignty isn't about closing the door, but knowing exactly when to open it. Japan's refusal to accept foreign rescuers wasn't arrogance. It was the logical endpoint of a constitutional architecture designed to keep the nation's security self-contained. The same laws that built a world-class disaster force also erected a wall. But as the planet enters an era of overlapping catastrophic risks, that wall may finally come down. The new agency is a start. The question now is whether the next megaquake will see Japan not just giving help, but finally receiving it.